So, Lisa, it's such a pleasure to have you here in Orange County at LSI conference. Thank you for doing this.
I have to say thank you, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks to LSI as well for hosting what looks like it's gonna be a tremendous, event.
So, you are Executive Vice President and Group President of Medical Devices for Abbott. But I would like to start with the person behind the title. So, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit where you come from and how your journey was to lead medical devices at Abbott?
Well, as someone who grew up in the cornfields of Illinois, I would say I'm really happy to be here in Dana Point this morning with you all. So it is just a fantastic honor. And so, yes, I did grow up in Illinois. I actually came out to school in California. I have spent most of my adult life in California. I did spend some time back in the Midwest, both in the Chicago area and the Twin Cities, which is, as you know, a mecca in med tech. But I'm an engineer by training and did management consulting out of undergraduate, actually in healthcare. So I worked with hospitals, healthcare systems, trying to drive efficiencies. That still is very much work in process, as we all know in the world of healthcare. And then went back to business school, and I had. As an engineer, had always envisioned doing things in tech. And so, in fact, I did my senior project at this little company down the road called Apple. And so in the summer between my first and second year of business school, I interned at Dell, which at the time was a bit of a, high flying startup. And but at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? I really love the impact and the opportunity to have our products really make a difference. And so that's how I found MedTech. So it was the combination of healthcare and technology. And that's where I started out of business school, and I haven't looked back. So I started my career at a company called Guidant, which was a leader in cardiovascular medical devices. It was just after Guidant had gone public; it had spun out of Eli Lilly,
Yeah.
and so it was a great learning ground, amazing leaders, and amazing innovation. And so it was a fun opportunity for me to learn and grow, and did a bunch of different roles there, primarily in sales and marketing, and then was running a business. And as you know, Guidant ended up being sold. Part of it went to Boston Scientific, part of it went to Abbott. And it's interesting because some people think I just went as part of the Abbott side. I was like, oh no, I went to Boston Scientific. So cardiac surgery and cardiac rhythm management went to Boston. And I was running that business, and it was an interesting time because while I was in the process of integrating the business I was running,
Mhm.
we were actually in the process of selling it. So I felt like I was had many different hats on depending on who I was speaking to. So we spun it out, and I just decided, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I still live there. As you all know, there's a ton of innovation that happens there, and so much of innovation happens in the startup arena. I was like, if I'm ever going to do it, now is the time. And
Yeah.
so I made the move into a startup. So it was early stage. We had they had raised their Series A funding. They had then done their uh, 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 a bridge loan. They had done the Series A prime, and I took over from the founder or CEO. There, I was employee number 14. So I know what room is that, Monarch. Those are my people. So I know the pain and what it takes. And so fast forward, we always say like it's an overnight success story, 11-year overnight success story. But I was there 11 years. So I went from like the very early stage where we had a bioresorbable drug-eluting scaffold or stent. But not in the coronaries, which is the world I was in before, but
Mhm.
in the sinuses. And so we were charting new ground with the technology. We were charting new ground with the clinical science, and it was a slog along the way. So we raised a couple of different rounds of venture financing, ended up taking the company public. I had the great opportunity to leave that for some time. And then at some point, I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe I've been here 11 years. So I would never have thought, because usually startups, well, they usually fail, right? Don't tell our friends next door, but they usually do fail. And that's just part of the journey. And so going in, I thought that would probably be what had happened. But as it turns out, we played it forward, and there was just a phenomenal opportunity at Abbott. So I made the move to go from, big corporation and then down to a really early stage startup, built that back up, and then got a call with an Abbott. And we can talk more about what I do at Abbott, but I have a great fortune of leading medical devices for Abbott. And I've done that for almost the last 6 years.
Yeah. So how was it in your experience when you were with large established company and then you moved to a startup? Tell us a little bit more how that was for you as an experience.
Yeah. It was such a great learning experience because nothing happens in our space without innovation, and nothing happens without a real deep understanding of the customer.
Mhm.
And so it really put me, literally, sitting in procedures, really understanding the unmet needs, and really getting very intimate with and understanding what our customer needs were. And so that was just a great, as an engineer,
Yeah.
it was just a great opportunity. And it was also just very different. I was just talking to Katie Seisman, and we were talking about the difference of being in a big company and then smaller. And if you're the CEO, you're like, oh, let's do this. And literally, like, you do it that day or the next day. That doesn't always happen in a big company or a company like Abbott. So it was, but I did everything. I mean, I would support cases. I did, clinical data, QC. I was the CEO, but I was also the receptionist, and I did the dishes, right? And on occasion, if the team needed a little pick me up, I'd run out to Dairy Queen and get some dilly bars. So whatever it took.
Yeah.
So it was really fun. But I think there's a lot of the same because it's like really the focus on the customer. And I always say, like, if you do what's right for the customer, you do what's right for the patient, the rest of business really follows. So, and that's something I've actually been able to carry forward into Abbott. And I think in a startup, it's very clear. So I think that focus on the customer. And then I think it's the focus on just a few things and that, like, incredible focus, because in the startup, like, you're literally earning the right to do a clinical trial. You're earning the right to commercialize because of the way that the financing works, right? And so it's not like you have a big pot of gold, or I didn't have a big pot of gold. I don't know about you guys, but you really had to, demonstrate, say what you're going to do, and do what you said you're going to do. It's as simple as that. But I really learned the importance of focus and doing one or two things and doing them very well. And you may have a ton of ideas, and oh my goodness, my team was extraordinary. They had so many ideas of things we could be doing, and it was like, no, we need to do this one thing, do it well, and then we'll earn the right to do the next thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of innovators can relate to that. Uh, I started my career at a big company too. I was with Medtronic, and then when I was running business development, I met a lot of startups, and this like, okay, we can do it, and we can like really all this inspiration and enthusiasm you see from the CEOs of companies like all of you guys here. That's really inspiring, and that made me move to startup world as well. So,
Yeah.
but talking about your startup experience, so it does sound like a great success story, right? You came very early on, you did all your work, but from my experience, I know it's rarely a straight line to success. So, did you have a few bumps on the road?
Oh my God, I took a detour like day one. And so so I started in, when was it? Like March of 2008. And, I talked about the financing situation. I didn't fully appreciate the situation the company was in. Our drywall date was June, and I started in March. Like, and we'd already gone to the well. We've already gone to our existing investors. We had taken on a venture debt. Like, we're kind of at the end of the line. And this is where, like, naivete as a first time CEO really worked to my advantage. And so, and the great news is I had a fantastic team, and we kind of dug in, we hit the ground fundraising, and that was a great way to kind of learn the business, right? But I think we closed right around Memorial Day, like maybe a week or two. And so that was a little close. There was another time we had a kind of what seemed like almost a near-death experience. Oh, by the way, the timing was really great because you remember what happened in the fall of 2008, right?
Yeah.
So better lucky than good. Can't plan for that one though. The other time we had a near-death experience is we knew going in that the FDA had said, we're at least de novo 510(k). So the team took that to be a 510K, right? So we're sort of down the path. And I remember this so dearly because we were at the FDA on my birthday and found out that we were actually going to be a PMA.
Oh,
And oh boy. So I went into a company that I thought was going to be a relatively quick 510K process, and we would commercialize and we'd be
mhm.
successful, and it would be a 3-year deal. As it turns out, that PMA was it took a lot. So that was a near death experience because it was right in the midst. I think that was 2009. It was a tough time to raise more money. We ended up having to do a little restructuring. We weren't big, but we actually had to focus in because we realized we needed to redo our pivotal trial. And so it was there. We had so many near death experiences. We'd have to like catch up over drinks tonight. But we had gone through even when we were like we had enrolled our pivotal trial and we had our financing lined up, but it wasn't going to go through unless the data was positive. And I remember we unblinded over Labor Day weekend.
Oh,
And so, because we were like, well, at least that gives us a couple of days to figure out what we're going to do. If it isn't positive, it was positive, but we had already planned to be like, well, we won't take salaries. We're going to stop paying. Are there any lawyers in the room? Probably. The lawyers, the accountants, they were so used to like, I just need like 6 more months, guys. Trust me. But yeah, it was not at all a straight line.
yeah.
But as it turns out, it was a pretty good outcome.
And I think that's very inspiring because a lot of people probably in the audience had those near death experiences. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there could be a success story for your startups. And I would like to ask you, so how does your startup experience influence the work that you do at Abbott today? And maybe tell us a little bit more about what you're doing at Abbott.
Yeah, so I lead medical devices at Abbott. So that consists of 8 different businesses, 6 of which that are actually headquartered here in California. So I'm happily live here still, although I spend quite a bit of time in north of Chicago, which is where we're headquartered. So 40,000 people around the globe focusing on some of the most costly chronic conditions, debilitating diseases like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, chronic pain and movement disorders. So if I think about some of the learnings from the startup, I think very much it starts with the customer,
Hmm.
right? And just how important really understanding the customer is. And I still try to make it out. Whenever I travel, I try to actually spend time with some customers. So I kind of make it a point, so that it's something that I keep in touch with some frequency. So I'm hearing, relatively real time. And it's not that my team doesn't provide just a ton of extraordinary input, but I like to hear myself and just sometimes it's interesting what customers say and even more interesting what they don't say, right?
Hmm.
And even observing cases. So I still will do that. So I think it's important on customers. It's focus. So I think I took a lot of what we were able to do at Intersect and really like a keen focus on doing a few things and doing them well. And at a big company, that's hard to do because talk about a lot of ideas. We've got
Okay.
big businesses. My business is nearly 20 billion, right? So you can only imagine there's a lot of different products and projects and initiatives. And so it's just a matter of like making sure I'm clear, like,
Mhm.
what are the most important things I spend my time on, my leadership team spends their time on? And then I think it's the role of innovation. So I think all of those things have been played to sort of what we're doing at Abbott. And so innovation is still very much paramount. That fuels our industry. I don't need to tell this crew that. You guys, you live and breathe this every day. But that was something at Abbott that we had a lot of great innovation that was in various stages of the pipeline. It was just a matter of, getting it through the gauntlet, right?
Mhm.
So I had products that had been launched and pulled off the market. Like we had a leadless pacemaker from a startup called Nanostim that St. Jude had acquired that had been launched and then pulled off. And so we needed to redesign that, redo the trial, bring it back to market. You could kind of go down the line, whether it be my TAVI device. I mean, a lot of different things in the portfolio. But innovation is what's really fueling our growth right now.
Yeah. And I'd like to talk more about innovation because most people here are innovators. And very often, as we develop new technologies, they're less invasive to patients, and they take treatments from hospital to ambulatory surgical centers to physician's office and ultimately to patient's home. Like at Vibrato, we have a vascular technology to be used at patients' homes. So at Abbott, how do you think about reaching to patients outside of the four walls of the hospital?
Well, it certainly is a transformative time in healthcare and in specifically med tech. And I think we are finally at a point where we're moving from a system that's really geared to what I call sick care, right? You go to hospitals, you get something fixed, or you're sick, you get treated, to really more well care or truly health care. And I think as an industry, we're really leading the way there, especially with things like remote monitoring and management. I'll take, for example, CardioMEM. So this is our pulmonary artery pressure monitor. It's about the size of a paper clip, gets put in the pulmonary artery, and it helps identify signals of when a patient's heart failure might be worsening. And what's a beautiful thing about this is it allows the patient to actually be home, be ambulatory, living their best lives. And the sensor then will actually identify if they need to maybe change the medications or come in for a clinic visit. And unfortunately, like heart failure hospitalizations, a typical patient's in the hospital multiple times a year. It's an incredible cost to the system. It's incredibly disruptive for people living with heart failure, and it's incredibly resource intensive. So heart failure hospitalizations are incredibly costly and require a lot of staff, which, by the way, we're still very much in a healthcare worker shortage, right? And so this is really a win across the board with using sensors. Another great example of moving outside of the four walls of a hospital or clinic is what we're doing with our product called Neurosphere. So we have in our neuromodulation business, we have deep brain stimulators. So for people with Parkinson's or movement disorder. So if you're a patient with Parkinson's and you get a deep brain stimulator implanted, you're typically going into a center of excellence. So there's a couple of hundred of them. I'll just talk about the United States. Typically about 150 miles away on average, right? And so those patients need to go in to get their therapy adjusted. Much like you might change your medications, you're going to change your stimulation protocol. This actually was one of the fantastic things that came out of the pandemic is that very early on in the pandemic, we realized that people couldn't go in to access healthcare the way they had previously. And so while we thought something like telehealth was the future, we actually, and we had it on our product map, like maybe for 2027 or 2028, we actually said, you know what, we need to do this now. The need is now. And so we developed a platform where we're able to conduct visits, healthcare visits virtually from the comforts of someone's living room, and actually program the device virtually as well. And so they're literally meeting patients where they are when they need us. And so important, especially for patients with Parkinson's, because typically they can't drive themselves. So it's not just taking a whole day to go see a clinician. It's a care provider as well. And so it's been just a game changer. And what's great is we've continued to work and continue to gain support. There's still work we all collectively need to do to make sure our healthcare system supports things that drive efficiency, like telehealth, and moving outside the four walls of the hospital, like things like reimbursement and things along those lines. But that's absolutely the direction we should go.
Yeah, because if you think about patients, and we always put patients in the first place, it's not like they sit and can't wait to go to a hospital, right? Like
Yeah.
they don't want to go to a hospital unless they have to. So the more we can bring the technology to where they are, the better. And I'm glad to hear this from you. Another thing that I like about Abbott is that you guys have always been at the forefront of direct to consumer med tech. So maybe talk about that a little bit and how you think about it at Abbott.
Yeah, so that's one of the unique things about Abbott. And while I run our medical devices business, we have diagnostics. Some of you may have used our Buy Next Now test in the heat of the pandemic. That was very much a consumer focused product. We also have nutrition, so we have everything from Similac all the way to Ensure. And so we literally cover the lives of people and the nutritional needs. And so all of that experience means like we really understand consumers.
Hmm.
And that was new for me because most of my experience has been B2B, right? It's
Hmm.
been selling to physicians, selling to healthcare providers, selling to hospitals and integrated delivery networks. And so it's been really great to be able to tap into the consumer expertise at Abbott. And then specifically within medical devices, we've had our Freestyle Libre device, which is our continuous glucose monitor. And that's for people with diabetes. So, as you know, if you have diabetes, you oftentimes need to check your glucose levels, your blood sugar levels, and you do that by historically pricking your finger. And in fact, that's the standard of care, right? Like that is how people all around the world today, the vast majority of people do that to get their blood measurement. And now we're able to do that with a little sensor that's on the back of your arm, where we're literally measuring your glucose values every minute. And it gets sent to your phone. It'll tell you like, oh, it's going high, it's going low. Here's what you should do. We're now connecting to pumps. So we're really alleviating the pain there. And that was for me, my first entry into consumer, because while that business has historically focused on the endocrinologist and the primary care physician,
Hmm.
at the end of the day, the consumer is owning more and more of their healthcare. And certainly with people diabetes, where they're literally managing their health each and every day, whether it be their nutrition or their exercise, they're oftentimes taking insulin. It's paramount. And so, in fact, today we have about 7 million people every day that rely on Freestyle Libre. So it's been a very widely adopted. And as I say, like as well as that team has done, and it's been really pretty extraordinary, the adoption in the last 5 years. There are over 500 million people who could benefit. So they have work to do. And so we're just scratching the surface. But we're actually leveraging that technology and bringing it into the consumer biowearable space. So we just launched in the fall a new product called Lingo. This is leveraging that same glucose monitoring, but it's for healthy people who want to stay healthy, or maybe people who need a little bit of adjustment. Maybe they want to lose some weight, or they want to have less stress, or they want to sleep better. We've actually launched Lingo, and the uptake's been fantastic. And it's different, right? Because the information, so it's both the sensor as well. It's an app, and the app will tell you things like your glucose is rising or it's spiking. You might want to go for a quick walk. Why don't you do 15 squats? Why don't you make better choices next time? All those kinds of things. So I call it my accountability partner. It's like my little buddy. And I know you would think after 30 some odd years in healthcare, I would know how to make good choices.
No,
No,
there is.
as it turns out, data speaks. And what better thing to actually have your own data, like personalized insight about how your body might react to stress or nutrition or exercise, and it's giving you suggestions. It's coaching you to do better. So, and this is interesting when you talk about consumers, is you can go online, hellolingo.com, and order it. You can go on Amazon and order Lingo.
Yeah.
So completely new world. And thinking about here, it's an opportunity to leverage technology that we use more in a traditional medical setting to use it in the consumer world. And this is just the beginning.
Yeah, and I just need to tell you a personal story. So, years ago, when I was pregnant, I had gestational diabetes. Continuous glucose monitoring was
Did
not
not exist.
available
Yeah.
then. So, I had to poke my finger 3 times a day, and it was not fun.
Yeah.
And but recently, I tried Abbott's device
Oh,
just
I'm
to
happy to
kind of,
hear.
yeah, just to kind of see how my body reacts to certain foods. It's very insightful, like you can hear a lot of like overall guidance, but it's personalized medicine, how like your particular body, reacts with your sugar levels to certain foods and how you like what you should or should not do. That's very helpful. So Thank
I think
you.
it's the future, right? Personalized medicine, and we should be able to understand. And this is just glucose, right? But when you start putting in things like nutrition and the foods that you eat, your exercise, your sleep, your stress, and you start integrating all of that data and thinking about leveraging AI, it is just so powerful.
Yes. So thank you for bringing all these products to patients and to people, not just patients. But you just mentioned AI, and that is the trend that's impossible to ignore.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. How does Abbott think about AI and its application in healthcare?
Uh, well, I think like any company, it wouldn't even be in healthcare. We're very much leveraging AI on productivity enhancements, right? So things, whether it be customer service or complaint handling, document preparation, all of those things, thinking about how can we become more efficient in what we do. And that allows us, if we drive efficiencies, that allows us to do more in innovation, right? And so on the innovation front, just imagine a world where you could leverage, I think about continuous glucose monitors. We probably have 200 or so, 200 t- uh, terabytes of 200 million terabytes of data. We have
Wow.
50 billion hours of glucose data. So imagine the power of being able to leverage all of that. And then I think about I'll just take an example where we have AI today is with PCI, so coronary interventions. So a stent procedure. Stent procedures have been around for gosh, since I've been, because I remember being, in the late 90s launching some of the first stents. But you think about like the placement there and you just recognize how AI can be leveraged. We actually have a program that's enabled by AI. It's our OCT imaging platform,
Mhm.
which detects calcium within the artery, will detect things like vessel diameter. And I see some folks from the guiding and coronary world in here, so you know what I'm talking about. And now we're actually able to leverage literally, tens of thousands of experience from physicians to help physicians determine what's the right place to put the stent, what's the
Mhm.
right length of stent, all of those things. So talk about like democratizing healthcare because you can learn from millions of patients or learn from tens of thousands of clinicians for the very patient you're treating in the moment. And that's happening now.
And so thinking about innovation and the future of medtech. So, what do you think is next, in your opinion, for medtech as an industry?
It's an exciting time in med tech.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. I think that's why there's so many people at this conference because, first and foremost, there's a lot of big unmet needs. We have a lot of work to do to continue to improve outcomes, drive efficiencies. And I think in cardiovascular, for example, and you think about like, oh, well, isn't that kind of problem solved? Well, no, it's not. So we're taking things from being invasive procedures like open heart, valve replacement to doing it much less invasively through a, transcatheter approach, and doing repair and replacement from the groin. I think just in cardiovascular, we have probably 80 something clinical trials that are enrolling globally in 37 different countries.
Wow.
Um, that's a lot of
Yep.
clinical research. So we don't have all the answers. There's miniaturization of devices. It's even areas that you think are more, uh, m- uh, lower growth or, there isn't, we've kind of solved the problem, right? I think about something like what we're doing with our leadless pacemaker. And so traditional pacemakers, have a wire that's threaded into the heart, couple wires, and you have a generator up here. And the problem with that is there's wear and tear, right? And so the leads may fracture, causing the need to doing reinterventions, all of those types of things. We have, and this pacemakers have been around 60, 70 years, right? It's the way it's been done. Like, why would you reinvent that? Well, as it turns out, there's a better way, or at least there's another way for some patients, and that's using a leadless pacemaker. So once again, it's about the size of a AAA battery. It gets placed transcatheter in the bottom of the ventricle, no leads. Patient has full movement. And now we're doing it dual chamber. So we actually able to, for the first time, communicate from the top of the heart to the bottom of the heart with implantables, miniaturized implantables. So I think the miniaturization, taking things outside of the four walls of healthcare, four walls of a hospital, which is traditionally where we've been. I think all the work we're doing on connected tech is really very much in the beginning. I'll take Freestyle Libre, for example. We actually just a partnership with an insulin delivery pump, which just announced a couple of days ago with a smaller company. We're actually partnered with all the major insulin pump delivery AID devices as Abbott. And so I think that connected technology, recognizing we have a glucose monitor, it's a leading glucose monitor in the world, but we recognize that people need different technologies. And so to be able to connect that data, have it flow seamlessly, and actually be able to have the pump then act on what's happening with the sensor and vice versa, right? And so I think connected tech is a big area. AI, obviously. And then I think about just like connected tech, it requires collaboration. And so as I think about the future, gone are the days that a company like Abbott does things on their own. Right. And in fact, we've been around 130 some odd years as Abbott. And traditionally we had done a lot of things sort of on our own as a company. And we might partner with a country or a government, or certainly we all have always partnered with our customers, but we're actually thinking probably more non-traditionally, thinking about partnerships, whether it be even within our ecosystem with other med tech companies. In fact, I did a partnership that was announced last summer with Medtronic. And you wouldn't necessarily think I would partner with Medtronic, right? Because as it turns out, I compete with them on just a few things. But it was the right thing for patients. And it was the right things for customers because they have a fantastic pump and we have a leading glucose monitor, and we're actually working together on that. So there's no, I think, a time in my career in healthcare that collaboration hasn't been as important as it is today. Like, healthcare is a team sport, and we need to think more expansively about how we partner. And so it's such an exciting time. And it's meetings like this, right, that allow that kind of collaboration. It's whether you're learning about other companies and thinking about, oh, we might be able to leverage that, or we might be able to work together, or it's the casual discussion you have over coffee or a drink. I think collaboration is so critically important.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly right. Like one thing that I like to see is like the industry coming together, right? And thank you, Scott and LSI team, for providing this fantastic platform for people to meet, to talk, to collaborate, bringing investors, strategics, innovators together. And one of the partnership that I like to see that's happening is between LSI and AdvaMed, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I've had a great pleasure of serving on the board of AvaMed for the last, I don't know, it's been over, I'll just say a decade or two, maybe. We'll see. I kind of lose track of time because, well, I'm old. And but it's been
You don't look
fantastic.
that.
As you might imagine, Avamed's been pretty busy lately. And I think, Juliana, you're doing a session with Lishan and some of the others talking about what's happening in
Yeah.
DC, because as it turns out, there's a fair amount. But we actually have a fantastic opportunity. It's actually in Southern California. It's just down in San Diego. We have our MedTech conference that we're hosting in October. So I encourage you all because we're trying to also create a convening. I think historically we've all gone to like the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference, right? How many of you guys have gone? Yeah, it's a zoo, as it turns out. And it's not just med tech, right? There's everything. And it isn't necessarily kind of just our ecosystem. And so I think opportunities like this LSI conference, I think the med tech conference that we have in October, where all of the strategics are there, whether it be the big companies or the smaller public and a lot of the private companies through the Excel board. And then also, you have the regulators, you have CMS, you've got it's a global presence as well. And then certainly a lot of investors too. And so we're starting to build out the investor side, recognizing that's a big part of the ecosystem, both VCs as well as private equity. So if you guys haven't checked out that conference, please do. I'm actually chairing it this year. So I'm actually extra biased, that it's going to be amazing. And Juliana and I are going to be working on that. So it's going to be yet another fun opportunity to work with you.
Yeah, thank you. But I also want to say thank you to LSI because, this conference that specifically focused on investors that you, LSI team and USCOT bring together is very helpful for innovators and
Yeah, it's
startups.
really extraordinary. I hadn't realized how big this had gotten. And I know I was
Yeah.
talking to Scott the other night, and I've always had like a conflict week, the week it is in March. And somehow this year they were a week apart. So I was really excited to be able to be here. And I'm hopeful I can make this an annual deal because it's super efficient for me as well. And fun, by the way, too. But it is also efficient because I get to see a lot of you and a lot of investors, folks I don't always see all the time. I know my team does, but I don't always get the chance to connect with you all. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. And I think it's a great way to showcase all the innovation that's happening in the industry right here. So, and thank you, Lisa, for this conversation. It's been such a pleasure to have you here, and I hope you'll keep coming in the future years.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll all work out. And it's not a bad location, as I said. You can't beat this. So thank you all. Hope you have a great conference. That you do take the need for collaboration to heart as well, because it is absolutely a team sport. So thanks for all you do.
Thank you.